All right, guys. Today I have a very special guest. Dr. Anthony Chaffee is on board. He is the plant-free MD. He's a carnivore doctor who is in incredible shape and was a former rugby player. He lives down in Australia, and he's spreading the good word of carnivore, and he's doing it in a very strict manner for himself, but also doing it in a very nice way that I think makes carnivores look good. So without further ado, the plant-free MD, Dr. Anthony Chaffee.
Fighting out of Sacramento, California.
Woo! What you gonna do?
Better. Stronger.
Son of a bitch.
Faster.
Oh yeah!
Yeah, so I've actually just been recently diving into your information. So just to give you a little bit of a background, we rolling, Russell? We're rolling, so we'll just roll right into it. Give you a little bit of a background. I first started messing around with a carnivore diet way back in 1992 when I first moved to California. Simply, somebody told me I was too fat at the gym. A fellow powerlifting friend of mine, he just said, "Hey, look, you're too fat, and you'd be a really good power lifter if you weighed a lot less." And me not knowing anything at the time, just simply said to him, "I don't know how to do that. What do I do?" And he said, "Red meat and water." And
Nice.
that's what my brother Mark and I originally sort of coined this diet a long time ago, the red meat and water diet. And it was really just simple, and it was what I used to lose a lot of weight. So I would drop an entire weight class down in powerlifting and still be able to beat everybody, because I was on a high fat, high protein diet. A lot of people thought that was weird. A lot of people thought it was crazy. And then flash forward to seeing Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that sort of got me back into this whole carnivore lifestyle. So we've been messing around with this stuff for years, and I was sort of like wondering, what's your introduction to this? How did you get into all this?
Yeah, so I had it probably back in 2000 when I was in college at University of Washington in Seattle. And I've always been big into meat. Like, I mean, just naturally since I was a kid, like I only wanted to eat meat, and I was forced to eat vegetables. I was that kid that had to be like restrained at the table and forced to eat broccoli and everything like that. And I always loved meat anyway. But in 2000, I was taking cancer biology and my part of my undergrad degree, and we just went through the science. I mean, botany is a hard science, and we actually
Mhm.
have entire volumes of books on all the different plant toxins that exist in plants that we eat and the ones we don't eat. Right? Most plants are inedible. Right? Everyone should understand that you get lost in the woods and you run out of food. You can't just eat any random plant. Most of them will harm you or kill you. And then we have some of these things that are less toxic to us, but that doesn't mean they're not toxic. And so even the WHO has pages of this, of talking about all the natural toxins in the plant foods that we eat. And we were learning this from a cancer perspective, that plants just defend themselves naturally by using poisons because they're immobile, they can't run away or fight back like an animal can, so they have to use poisons to stop animals and insects from eating them. And looking at it from a cancer perspective, we were looking at all the different carcinogens that were in them, and how Brussels sprouts had at that time had already discovered 136 known human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts, and mushrooms had over 100. Spinach, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, you name it, all of these things had 60, 80, over 100 known, identified, named human carcinogens in them. And they were quite abundant. We've known since the 1980s from the work out of UC Berkeley with Bruce Ames that there are about 10,000 times more naturally occurring toxins in vegetables like spinach than by weight than the pesticides we spray on them industrially, and that the naturally occurring toxins are orders of magnitude times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides we spray on them. I think like mushrooms were 500 times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides. They were looking at alar in that
Wow.
particular study. So yeah, so it's quite significant, and we were blown away by this. And I remember everyone was just like thrashing around, looking around like that who's in on the joke. And finally dawned on us that this guy was serious. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just looked at us and he just gave us this funny look, like you guys just aren't getting this. He said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, fuck plants. I
Yeah.
just like stopped like right there. And I went to the store and I was just looking at everything, and everything had plants in it. And everything had plants, used plants, and grains, whatever. And so I just ended up naturally just grabbing eggs and meat and some milk. I
Yeah.
drank milk at the time. And that was it. And I just did that for years. And the main reason was because I didn't want to eat plants. And I felt absolutely amazing. And like my athletic performance just went through the roof. And I was always lean and strong and just had boundless energy. And I just felt great. I did that for like 5 years and sort of slipped off of it, just because it was when I was playing rugby in England, it was a bit more difficult to get the meat that I wanted. Half of it was breaded, and I was just like, oh, is that big of a deal? And it was, but the biggest thing was it started to make me slip off of it, and I stopped thinking about it as this is a big deal, and I felt worse, but I didn't make the connection. And then, as same as you, I came across Dr. Baker's podcast on Joe Rogan, several years ago, and everything just clicked in. I'm like, that's what I was doing. That's what I was doing for years. I was eating just a carnivore diet, and we are carnivores. That biologically, like this makes sense. And I was a doctor at that point. I started looking at medicine from that standpoint of humans are animals, and the kind of animal we are is carnivores, and we're not eating as such. And so we're getting problems related to eating the wrong diet, and things just started clicking into place for me. And I just started really, really digging into the research after that.
Yeah. There's a lot of debate around whether or not humans are carnivores. We have a gym here in Sacramento, and I get to talk to a lot of different people. And I was talking to this girl. She is she basically works in like anthropology. I was asking her if humans were carnivores, and she like laughed at me. She's like, "Oh no, that's not true." So what is your take on? Because I oftentimes speak to people with more knowledge than me, and I'm not a doctor, and it's hard for me to differentiate these things. So what sort of facts do you base that on, that we are carnivores?
Yeah. So it does depend a bit on your definition of terms. So you could call us omnivores because we are able to subsist on more plants than, say, like felines. We call cats and felines obligate carnivores because basically all plants will kill them. And yet we still give them cat food that has grain and plant-based
Sure. Yeah.
fillers in it because it's cheaper. So they can survive on these plants. Does that make them omnivores? No, they're classified as obligate carnivores. Same with dogs, canines, things like that. They are called scavenger carnivores because they can survive on a bit more plant food. Well, we have an herbivorous past. We were closer to, our ancestors were herbivores more recently than canines and felines. So that's why we have a bit more robust defenses in our nature.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in plants that we have to have that we cannot get from meat. But there are things in meat that we have to have that we cannot get from plants. And so I think that actually makes us obligated to eat meat, and we do get harm from the plants. So to me, I think that makes us obligate carnivores. Just because we can survive on certain things doesn't mean that that's optimal for us. And I think if you're going to talk about omnivore, carnivore, herbivore, you're thinking about what's optimal for that species. What's optimal for an omnivore, that would mean that you could get equal nutrition out of both, or you have to eat one and the other to get optimal nutrition. We don't fall into either of those categories. So that's one sort of just setting the definitions in my head. But when you look at anthropology, you're looking at current cultures that are not necessarily how we evolved and how we lived even 10,000, 50,000, 300,000 years ago. You look at paleoanthropologists such as Mickey Bendor, who wrote a large peer-reviewed paper showing the evidence for the fact that humans and our ancestors have been living as carnivores, eating basically exclusively meat or a high proportion of their diet from meat for at least the last 2 million years. And I don't know how many vegetables and things like that are available during the ice ages, when we had a lot of these our ancestors were up in the ice shelves hunting mammoths and things like that. Maybe they had some plants here and there, but I don't know if you can really say that definitively. We have the stable isotope research has been very interesting. There's a ton of research, a ton of papers using that technology. The stable isotopes look at stable isotope nitrogen 15. And there's a certain amount of this in plants, and then animals eat those plants and they get a certain amount of nitrogen 15 in their bones, and you can calculate that. Then the animals who eat the plants, they have a higher concentration of nitrogen 15 and it stays there. And then the animals that eat the animals that eat the animals that eat the plants have, again, a higher level. And so you can actually map out the food chain, right? Because there are predators and carnivores that get eaten by other predators and carnivores, and they're sort of like like seals. Sea lions are pretty good predators. They eat a lot of animals, but they also get eaten for lunch by orcas and sharks. So they're not top of the food chain. Our ancestors, according to the stable isotope study, were top of the food chain. We had a higher carnivore rating than even lions, hyenas, foxes, wolves, and other carnivores alive at the same time in the same area, meaning that we were eating the lions, hyenas, foxes, and wolves as well. I'm sure we were getting eaten as well sometimes, but we were eating them more often than they ate us. And so that's pretty good evidence that we were top of the food chain. That's good hard scientific evidence. There are anthropological examples as well. The Inuits, aren't too many vegetables up at the North Pole. Maybe they'll get some lingonberries and things like that in the summer. Maybe some do, but that's first of all, that's not definitive that everyone does every time. And they certainly don't have like big stores of these things that they're eating all throughout the year. They eat meat, they eat fat. There were studies looking at their cancer rates in the Inuit population that eats in their traditional way. They have like zero cancer rates. They do not get cancer. They do not get breast cancer. They don't get heart disease, diabetes. When they're living in cities eating Western diets, then they get diabetes, then they get heart disease, then they get cancer because they're eating the wrong things.
Yeah.
And so you can see that people get harm when they're eating outside of a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
And you can look at and it goes into biology and anatomy and things like that too, which I could go into, but I won't bore you.
No, it's very interesting that you say that, because my brother and I for a long time have had this, we call it the war on carbs. We've been talking about this forever. Basically, in our opinion, when you look at these other societies and they bring in the sugar, the flour, and the vegetable oil, people get really fat and sick. And then you have all these like vegetable oil loyalists online or something. I don't know why people are dead set on telling you that vegetable oil is not bad for you. There's other people dead set telling you that flour is not bad for you. There are people dead set saying that sugar is not that bad or not inherently inflammatory on its own. However, we know it causes a cascade of medical issues in a lot of people. Like half the people we have here in the United States are in the hospital because of things they ate, because of metabolic diseases, and 88% of the country or something like that is unhealthy. And we look at these things and then people still want to deny it. And they say, well, the fact is that people are eating too much. But I still think people are eating too much junk. And when I actually, personally, my opinion on oil is that people don't need any oil. Why do you need olive oil? Why do you need avocado oil? Why do you need, rapeseed oil or, any of these other oils canola oil that they're using? You're just taking the fat, which is the highest calorically dense thing in the plant, and you're just extracting that. It's very similar to sugar, how you just extract sugar. Now you take away the fiber and all the things that could have possibly helped you digest that, and you got rid of it. And so it's always been my thought that I don't think people need oil. You call yourself the plant-free MD, and I was just wondering, does that ever get you into trouble at all? Because there's times when I want to have some fruit, or there's times when I want to have some things. Does that ever tie you down, do you feel?
Yeah. No, I'm plant-free, like purely because I don't want to eat things. And I've seen the harm that they can do just on a intellectual level, like looking at all the different harmful toxins that are in there and how they can damage your body in various ways. I just did a whole talk actually at a medical conference the other day, and I actually titled it "Plants Are Trying to Kill You."
Yeah.
And so I argued in front of 300 doctors that vegetables are a really bad idea, and it was a very provocative sort of title. But afterwards, there's a lot of established medical practitioners that are like, I didn't know any of that stuff. I'm not going to eat plants anymore.
Sure.
And it's if you want to eat some fruit, you want to eat a salad or something like that, I mean, go for it. I noticed that it makes me feel worse, and I don't want to do that. And so,
Yeah.
I can actually, I can actually notice if like some things will slip in, or maybe there's some seasonings on something, and I just sort of go, "Oh, okay, well, let's try this. Let's see what happens to me." I can notice that, maybe my nose gets a bit more stuffed up, my face gets a bit itchy, maybe my asthma sort of perks up a bit. And I just, that bothers me. And I don't like that. I like
Yeah.
feeling my best all the time. And God forbid some like carbs or grains, beans or rice, something like that would like mix in with some of my food. I'll get horrible back pain and for days afterwards. I
Yeah.
had some like rice and beans sort of slipped into the food. I was trying to scrape it off, but some got on. I was like, well, is it going to be that big of a deal? And I was sort of experimenting at the time too. I was like, well, maybe I'll just have a spoonful of rice and beans and see what that does to me. And I said, no, that's an excuse. If I do that, then I'll I might slip off and make that excuse other times. And even not doing that, just having some of it sort of stuck to the meat I was eating, my back killed me for like 4 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And so, I don't feel limited because I don't look at that as food anyway.
Yeah.
I don't look, I don't feel, if I'm at a party and people are doing a bunch of cocaine, I don't feel limited that I'm not doing cocaine. I just
Yeah.
I don't want to do that, And so it's, for me, it's purely by choice. It's purely because I actually don't want to eat that stuff. And, I mean, you're right as well. Like, I think these food causes harm, and I can feel it in my body, and I don't like that. You're talking about, people saying that this food doesn't cause harm, but just look at the fact that the Native Americans, when eating a Western diet, are 4 times as likely to get heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and all the rest when eating a Western diet. So what does that mean? That means the food is causing the,
Sure.
because when they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. And Europeans eat the food, Europeans get the disease. We just get it at a lower rate because we've had agriculture for 8,000 years, whereas the Native Americans were only introduced to this stuff more recently. There's some agriculture in a bit, but the majority of people had not been exposed to these
Yeah.
sorts of things. And, and sugar is absolutely toxic. Dr. Robert Lustig from UCSF Medical School, he showed that like the sugar industry makes about $1.3 trillion a year, but the consequences of the sugar industry in the medical expenses, just treating the effects of sugar like metabolic disease, accounts for about $2.4 trillion a year. So it's massive cost and burden on people's lives and pocketbook. And the oils as well. I totally agree with that. When you take an oil outside, I mean, I'm not going to touch the plants anyway. I mean, there's a different sort of constellation of
I like your style so far. To tell you, man, I really do like. And you're not very dogmatic to people. I don't see you putting people down or yelling at people for eating plants. I just see you saying, "Hey, look, it's just not for me."
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, this is just a decision that I've made, and there are reasons for that. And so, not everybody knows those reasons. And so I just want people to have the information. If people want to smoke, they want to drink. Like I really don't care. Like I'm very libertarian on this. I like people being able to make their own decisions in their own life and saying like, this is what's important to me. My health and feeling great all the time is what's important to me. And that's the decision that I make. But I really don't care. I just don't want them to be doing something because they think it's really healthy when in fact I think it's harming them.
Yeah.
Like doctors used to say that smoking and drinking was good for you. That didn't work out so well. And so I don't care if people eat salad or smoke. I just don't want them thinking that I should eat a salad because that salad is really good for me. If you enjoy that, then fine. But
I think people don't look at these carnivore diets either for a lot of the other benefits they can have. Like, so, for example, I know we don't really know each other too well, but when I was 35 years old, I had to have both my hips completely replaced. I'm 49 right now, but I still lift really heavy, still train heavy all the time. I feel amazing. And for a long time, I didn't feel amazing. I felt terrible every day. And even watching, even over the years, the past couple of years, watching people like Dr. Sean Baker and Michaela Peterson talk about like, oh yeah, well, I had like some fruit and my back hurt. And I'm going, come on, like that's not true. And then going through it myself several times, it's taken me a couple journeys through the carnivore diet to actually become pain-free. And I actually never thought I would get there. But for some weird reason, and you're actually part of this, more recently, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to go back full bore carnivore, see what happens. I actually turned 50 in 2 days. So I did this like about 2 or 3 months ago. I said, you know what? I'm going to make a charge towards 50, but I want to do it in my best health. And I feel amazing now. And a lot of it's been like, I'm pretty new to following you. I'm following people that are very dogmatic about carnivore too, because in a way, I don't know if you know Bart K. Do you know him?
Yeah.
So Bart K, he's kind of a lunatic about this stuff. He'll be like, "You're an idiot if you're eating anything but animal foods." But in a way, I sort of like to protect myself and keep my mindset on like why I'm doing it, which is crazy. But even just cutting that 10% of plants that I was eating, because I was doing a very heavy like meat and fruit diet, a lot of meat, a lot of fruit. We actually taught that to Paul Saladino when he came here to our gym, and he started pushing that a lot too, and Liver King and some other guys. So if there's a problem with that diet, it's probably our fault. But my brother and I were really pushing that because we found the fruits to be the least egregious of the plants that were out there that you could eat, and that was sort of our reasoning for it. But even just cutting that little bit has helped me tremendously, and that's like all I try to do is get the word out to other people. Like this helped me tremendously. Possibly it could help you. If it doesn't, go back to what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, that's all any of us can do is just try to do what's best for our body, and then try and pass that on if we found something interesting that works. And I agree with you. I think that getting rid of that sort of those last vestiges of plants actually makes a massive, massive difference. Because I mean, even just like a little bit of carbs will raise your insulin to the degree that it will change your metabolic function, and it will turn you into sort of a fat storing metabolism versus a fat burning metabolism, and it can cause other problems as well. And and just having chronically high insulin is quite bad for you. It causes high blood pressure,
Yeah.
can screw with your hormones as well. So I really like that. I really like being like pure, just meat and water, and I find that really helps me. And so like people that I talk to, I try to encourage that and just say, hey, just try it for a month, just meat and water. Even like, the meat and fruit guys. I mean, you're already doing better than 99.99% of people in the
Sure.
world. You're eating meat and fruit, but just try dropping the fruit for a month and see. I guarantee you're going to feel better. And so far, most people have.
Yeah, I think like most of the people that my brother and I were pushing the meat and fruit stuff to are fairly very healthy to begin with. Like all these guys are already pretty ripped and pretty lean. And then they're getting like leaner and feeling better and coming back and telling us like, hey, I feel, amazing. And now I'm just a little bit more aware that the fruit could possibly be, an issue in there. And I've just been a little bit more careful about like, I should say and admit that I'm pretty much a maniac when it comes to food. So you give me like the ability to eat meat and fruit. Of course, what ends up happening is you stop prioritizing protein and you start eating tons of fruit, and then like not as much meat. And I think that that's another thing where, when you're doing a meat and fruit diet, you still got to hit that protein number. And then you still like fruit's just the leftover.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people come to like you say, some of these people that are doing meat and fruit, they're already in good shape. They already take care of themselves. They already are fairly healthy. A lot of people come to a carnivore diet because they're unhealthy, and because they've had a very, very problematic and unhealthy relationship with food. And sugar, is a problem because it can be addictive. Fructose actually gives a dopamine signal to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. And so this can be a problem. You can actually get addicted to these things again, and people can have carb addictions and sugar addictions. And then all of a sudden, I've spoken to many people about this since Dr. Saladino came out and talking about this a few years ago. I went on Baker's podcast and was just like, I just heard about it, and he was just like, "Is there anything particular you want to talk about?" I'm like, "Well, yes, actually, I think that this is a problem that people are recommending you eat fruit, and sugar and honey, and not even just saying it's okay, but hey, you have to do this or else you're going to be harmed." Which is false. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 decades and I've not had a problem.
Yeah.
And there are people doing keto for since the 60s. They've never had this problem. So there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You really don't need these things. And so I think that maybe it's fine to eat fruit every now and then. Sure, go ahead. But saying that you have to have it, I think
Yeah.
that's wrong. But The main thing is that, these people that come through this from an unhealthy relationship with food, they get told you can eat fruit and honey. They go, awesome. Like you say, they start eating a bit and they start eating more and eating more. They
You
start
could eat fruit
prioritizing
and
that
honey
over
all day, right? I mean, you could eat it
Yeah.
all day long. Tastes good.
Yeah.
So
And they yeah, exactly. And they do. And then it starts slipping off. And then they start eating other things and other things. And every single person that I've spoken to about that, well, that's come to me. Obviously, not everyone goes through this, but the people that come through from like like an unhealthy, food addiction standpoint, go to carnivore, get healthy, lose weight, and then they go back to this. Within 6 months, they're eating pizza and ice cream on the couch again. They've gained all the weight back. They have all the health problems again. And I've had a number of people contact me after I was on that podcast with Dr. Baker. That was long before I had a podcast as well. And they were like, you were dead right about that. That was exactly what happened to me. I really need to get back on this and really, really cut this out. So that's the problem that I sort of see with it in practice. Now there may be people, like Paul works out all the time. He's in great shape,
Sure.
and good for him. And like I played high level rugby, eating carnivore and eating normally, and I was in really good shape in both eras. But it's a lot easier for me to get in sick shape and stay that way on
yeah,
carnivore.
everybody knows about the Liver
Necessarily.
King, correct? Like everybody's aware
Very
of
true.
him.
Yeah,
But is it a
absolutely.
good idea to eat a pound of liver every day? I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
that we should be eating liver probably in the proportions it's found in the animal, which would seem like it would make the most sense if you were going to be like evolutionarily consistent.
I 100% agree with that. And, I mean, think about it. Like you take down like a buffalo, like a big full grown buffalo, right? Like you or I, like an individual that would have enough meat on it to live for 2 years on that thing,
Yeah,
and how many livers does it have?
has
Just
one.
the one.
Yeah.
Right. And it's sort of hard to preserve those things as well. And so that's it. You're going to have one liver over the course of 2 years, and the other organs as well. But the vast majority of what you're eating is skeletal muscle and fat.
Yeah.
And the Inuit, they didn't eat the organs, because in fact organs were a bit problematic because they had such a high concentration. Marine mammals have such a high concentration of vitamin A in their liver that like you could die. You
Yeah.
could die of vitamin A poisoning. Polar bear, like you can't eat any liver from a polar bear because like it will just kill you. And you eat enough of seal liver and it'll kill you.
And we don't need
So,
that much
yeah.
vitamin A, correct?
You
We-
don't need much at all.
we don't need
it
much at all.
lasts a long time. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
fat soluble vitamin. It's not like the B vitamins and C that they can just rinse out of you. You're just drinking a lot of water, and so you need to replenish this stuff constantly. The vitamin A and D and E, these and K as well. These things are fat soluble, so they stick around longer.
And also
and
one of
build
the
up.
one of the craziest pharmaceutical drugs of all time is Accutane, which is basically like pretty much pure vitamin A, isn't it? Something like
I believe so. Yeah,
And it's like
not-
really
not
bad
fun.
for you, so it's
Yeah.
it gets rid of acne, but it'll kill your liver and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you're eating like a high vitamin A diet anyway, and you're taking Accutane, like what is that doing to you?
Yeah.
I have my suspicions on that. And one of the best things for acne is just eating carnivore. You're not screwing up with your hormones, and you're not getting a lot of these weird toxins that screw with your skin as well.
What's your
And
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. What's your go-to advice for example, my producer, Russell, he's here with me today. We've been going through this diet stuff a lot. Russell, what are you weighing in now?
446 as of
446. He's down
70 pounds.
down like 70 pounds. We've been
Nice.
cranking on this diet stuff. How does somebody like Russell hang on? What kind of advice do you give to the
No
newcomers?
garlic? You think no garlic, no ground pepper, just salt?
Yeah. So yeah, for me anyway, and I mean, I've even noticed that, some things that have like a bit garlic in it, like, and that's the thing, like I always loved garlic, but, when you start eating a lot more meat, you really start appreciating actual flavor of meat. And then you start actually like pretty resenting things that cover up the taste of meat. Like garlic gets in, like you're screwing with this, and it's getting in the way of it. But then, I'll just feel a bit fuzzy, and I'll get like a bit of brain fog, and, my nose will be all stuffed up and runny, and I don't like it, and that's just with a bit, you do more, it's going to build up.
Well, I have a little bit of a
But-
confession to make. I still have some of that stuff in my diet, but after talking to you, the reason I wanted to talk to you is like I want to cut that stuff out.
Yeah, I find that it makes a big difference. And so like my hard rule, I think is as important what not to eat as what to eat, right? Obviously, you eat meat, eat fatty meat, drink water, but what you don't want to eat is just as important, right? Because that actually has harmful things in it. So my hard rule is no plants, no sugar, nothing artificial. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So it's really just meat, salt, water. Salt to take. You don't even have to use salt. There's a lot of people that don't use salt. You don't need it. But if you want it, I don't
Yeah,
see too much of
my
a problem.
big confession, which I know you're gonna be mad at me. I drink a lot of diet soda that just to hang on.
Okay.
It's like so I did go from drugs and alcohol down to being sober, down to just eating meat, down to like I got to get rid of the diet soda too. I feel like I have zero fun left in my life anymore, but I think that's what it's gonna have to be.
Yeah, I think yeah. Well, yeah, those artificial sweeteners, I think, cause more problems than people realize. And I know a lot of people that actually have had problems with that, and they said that like some people say that getting rid of the artificial sweeteners was harder than getting off the sugar.
Yeah, I would
And
think it might
so
be for
yeah,
me, honestly. Like I love like diet soda and shit.
yeah,
I gotta
yeah.
really be focused to get rid of that.
Yeah. Well, like any addiction and anything else, it goes away. And so if you stop it for about 2 weeks, 2 weeks, it's going to be
Yeah,
out of your
and
system and
speaking of
it's not going to
addiction,
mess with
I've been sober now for 8 years, going on 9, and honestly, like the reason I was hooked on drugs and alcohol was simple. I had really bad hips ever since I was a little kid. I had arthritis really bad at 35. I had to get them both replaced. Got hooked on pills. They messed up one hip. They had to do it over again. Got hooked on pills for a couple more years. It was just a mess. And it was really like just simply because of pain that I got myself into that. But once I got myself into it, obviously I was having a lot of fun. I was drinking and taking pills. It was a good time until it wasn't. And then when it wasn't, it got really dark and really bad and, into thoughts of being like suicidal and all these things. And to be honest, every single fear and doubt and like you're a piece of shit that I thought about myself that whole time has all gone away through this diet and what this diet has brought me, not only in my own self respect, but in, like I feel like a man again. I feel like I took care of my shit and I got over it. And now I'm over here. And now I have to act this way. And this way is like, you know, eating meat and doing the things that'll make you successful. And I think that that's really important that I went through that. I think that anybody that's going through an addiction or getting over an addiction, I think that these carnivore diets or some sort of strict diet, being strict with yourself in some way, can bring you to other places.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. That's a huge accomplishment. And like, you should be very proud of that because that's very difficult to do, especially when you're in that dark place, digging
Oh,
yourself
thanks,
out
man.
of that, and I think that especially with like, the depression sort of things, I've seen this help people in significant ways. I just posted on my Instagram a few days ago. It was just like really, really touching message that they sent me saying that, that they've been really improved. It's helped their autoimmune issues, helps their depression, that they were close to suicide. And then they found carnivore and now they come out of it and they're really thankful. And that really meant a lot to me. I don't, I mean, I didn't do this because like I'm trying to be an influencer and I'm trying to like have like a second job or whatever. Like I have a day job and it's very busy, and like this takes a lot of my time that I don't really have. But I think it's really important because I see it help people so much, and so seeing people have those results really means a lot to me, and so it's really great to see people like yourself having that results, which I think are amazing. And there are even studies that look into this. We already have literature on this. People with lower LDL cholesterol. We've been fighting against LDL cholesterol for 40 years, and yet we're finding that people that have lower LDL cholesterol have higher rates of disease, higher rates of stroke, and even heart disease, and that they're going to nursing homes, they're getting Alzheimer's, and they're getting depression. People that have lower LDL cholesterol have much higher rates of depression, and people that have depression and low LDL cholesterol have much higher rates of suicide as well.
Yeah.
So this is causing harm. And so when you start eating actual fatty meats that are good for you, that are good for your brain, that helps. But there's also things in plants. You mentioned Michaela Peterson. Jordan Peterson, her dad is on a carnivore diet, and sort of reluctantly, but it's just helped him so
Yeah,
much
he hates it.
that
Yeah.
and it's helped him so much that he has to stay on it. And they were doing like a high fat meat based keto thing, and they were just eating big salads with a bunch of meat, and he reversed a lot of his health issues, but he still had this crippling anxiety and depression. And then, on Michaela's urging, he just stopped the salads for a month. And within 3 weeks, his depression and anxiety had resolved. And he was like, salad was doing this to me.
Yeah.
And he was just shocked by it. But I see it. And there was, even a study with just keto that Georgia E just published recently.
I love her. I think she's one of the most
Yeah.
fascinating people I found in this whole space.
Yeah, no, she's great.
She does all the
And,
plants are going to kill you, basically. She does all that literature.
Yeah, and so and they took 32 patients that had serious psychiatric disorders where they were institutionalized and medications had not helped them, and they were refractory to normal allopathic medicine, and they put them, and so they had major depression, OCD, bipolar, and even schizoaffective disorder, like actual hallucination. Right? They put them all on a ketogenic diet. All of them improved. Right? But no medications were helping these people. Just changing their diet made them improve.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
what does that tell you?
It's amazing
massive.
too, because you look at some of these studies that they do where they're trying to get the right answer, and sometimes the answer comes out not being what they wanted. Like if you look at these fiber studies, right? What happens when they take away the fiber from people? A lot of people do better, right? Like they get rid of the fiber and they do better than they thought they were going to do, And I think that's interesting too. Like a lot of this carnivore diet, I believe we talk about this a lot around here, is it's what you're not eating, right? Like you said that before, kind of in a different way, but like it's really like what are you not putting in your mouth, and how does that affect you?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I mean, even like the seed oils, are in everything you were mentioning. But when you take the oil out of a plant, it actually becomes unstable. So it's actually worse for you than it would be in the plant, as you mentioned. And it breaks down into free radicals. We all talk about antioxidants. Well, this breaks down into oxidants. Things
Yeah.
that cause oxidative stress and damage, and they can be quite harmful. And especially when you cook with them. If in chemistry, like if you heat up a reaction 10 degrees Celsius, it doubles the reaction rate, right? So the breakdown and degradation into those harmful byproducts is a chemical reaction. It's sort of breaking down. And so if you cook with it, you're speeding up that reaction. So it's doubling. So it goes up exponentially. And so if you get up to that cooking temperature, you're increasing the reaction rate by millions of times.
Wow.
And so this all breaks down. There's all this nasty stuff very, very quickly. So
What happens with our cholesterol when we eat these foods that are high in cholesterol? Do we see a sharp rise in cholesterol? Does that matter? What should we be looking for in our cholesterol? I know a lot of people probably have those questions for.
Yeah, that's a major one, because people are obviously, rightly so, worried about their cholesterol, because it's been drilled into us for half a century that cholesterol is just the worst thing that you could ever have in your body. But you have to realize that cholesterol is your body. Every cell in your body is made out of cholesterol. The cell membrane is cholesterol. All hormones in your body,
Yeah.
testosterone, estrogens, progestogens, cortisol, DHEA, pregnenolone, all these things, they're all made out of cholesterol.
I usually
Vitamin
start
D.
there with a lot of people. I go, well, your testosterone's made out of cholesterol. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Because then they'll tend to listen,
Yeah, exactly. And it is. I mean, this is a very, very important molecule. And the idea that cholesterol causes heart disease is simply false. Like that was not even just wrong, it was a lie.
Yeah.
And we have documented evidence of this. University of California, San Francisco published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the top journals in the world, in 2015, actual internal memos from the sugar companies back in the 60s detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was really sugar. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published the 1977 USDA declaration that cholesterol caused heart disease. And that's what it changed the world. Even like we teach the Framingham study, and this is something people talk about in the cholesterol argument.
Hear about it all the time.
Yeah, it's so, and I learned this in medical school, like, oh, this Framingham study is a 20, 30 year, prospective study, and they followed people and they found that, oh, higher cholesterol equaled higher heart disease. Well, look at that. Well, that's a correlation and it's not a causation, right? Like when ice cream sales go up, so do shark attacks.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they're related? It pisses off sharks when you eat ice cream.
Yeah.
Probably not. So it's a correlation, right? But the problem with that is they actually didn't find that in the Framingham study. The Framingham study actually showed the opposite. Framingham study actually showed that people that had higher cholesterol had lower rates of heart disease, was actually protective. And then the AHA, the American Heart Association, misrepresented and wrongly published opposite results. So they published 2 years later, hey, look at this Framingham study. It showed the opposite of what it actually did, but that's what got the press. And that is actually taught in medical schools. When I was in medical school in 2009, they taught me that. And it's wrong. It's verifiably wrong. You can actually look up the actual Framingham study. And this is in the literature now as well.
It's so crazy too with nowadays, everything's disinformation, right? And it's like, what about the disinformation you were taught in medical school?
Yeah,
it's like we talk about misinformation and disinformation all the time. And what about the stuff we learned in school? A lot of it's been false for years,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't even learn that until a few years ago. So I, really started digging into this. And, and now I have a very, skeptical view of the world, and especially medicine. I was always had a very open mind with the things in medicine as well, because there were things that I sort of saw, because I came into medical school a little later. I took 10 years off to play professional rugby before I went to medical school. And so, I had been around a bit longer. And so, they're teaching me things. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That's kind of bullshit. And so I look it up and be like, yeah, I don't agree with that. So from day one, I was already a bit skeptical of certain things. And I was always understanding that, that my professors, whether they have the best intentions or not, may not have it completely right all the time. That's just something that I noticed throughout my education. And not that I held it against them. It's just like, just being realistic. Like, your professors don't necessarily know everything just because they're your professor. And so I always had that frame of mind. But also something that stuck with me was something that was said in medical school, which was, by the time you graduate medical school, all of this is going to be out of date.
It's all irrelevant by then. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, it really doesn't matter. Like, you have to stay current. And that's sort of a reiteration of what was famously said at a Harvard graduation, like in the 1930s. They said, in 10 years, half of what you learned will have been shown to have been false, but no one will tell you which half. So you have to keep on top of it yourself. And so I always kept that frame of mind that, things change and our understandings of things can change. And so you have to just look at the evidence. And so when I sort of was hit in the face with that, and being like, this is all wrong, I didn't have to fight an ideology going, no, I have to believe this because I learned this in medical school. But I've met people who think that way.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. It just sets you up for failure.
Yeah. And after, for me, I make documentaries about like what's wrong in the world. And so my documentary I made after Bigger, Stronger, Faster was Prescription Thugs, which was basically about, the medical system and big pharma. And it's even so much more relevant now. But even just because you learn something in medical school doesn't mean it's right? And just because you learn something from a medical journal doesn't mean it's right, because a lot of these medical journals are bought and paid for by the pharma companies. And a lot of this information that we get is bought and sold by the pharma companies. So I warn people, not to be crazy dogmatic either way. Just because pharma wrote it doesn't mean it's wrong, but just because they wrote it also doesn't mean it's right. So vet out all your different thoughts.
Yeah. And you have to, because there's, there are tons of studies that show that sugar is harmless, but they're all put out by, the sugar industry,
Well, yeah.
So
and then, when are you going to ever have sugar by itself? They'll say, oh, well, like, yeah, nobody just takes a bowl of sugar and just eats it. And you're like, well, that's not the way the normal body works anyway. We're told like everybody's so really dogmatic about calories online. And I just think calories are one of the worst ways to look at anything. And I think they put you in a position, I think they just set people up for failure rather than tell people, here's 10 good foods, eat these foods and your body will flourish, eat these other 10 foods and your body will go downhill. It's like, to me, that's the easy part, is like, rather than like capturing it in calories, captured in like what's good for you, you know? I think
Yeah,
that,
I think so. Exactly, like exactly the same. If we think about calories, that's it's not as simple as that. You can't just like reduce all the biochemical or responses in your body and reactions in your body to all of these different molecules. You can't just break that down to a calorie, right? So maybe that has a certain amount of energy. You burn it, it releases that much energy. That's how we measure calories. But these are complex organic compounds, you know, and it really sort of irks me when doctors, especially American doctors, because in overseas you don't have to necessarily do like an undergraduate science degree. You just go into medical school, and so you don't necessarily have a background in organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry,
yeah.
biochemistry. But any American doctor should damn well know this, because you've had to take organic chemistry and biochemistry. These are very complex organic compounds, and they have complex organic reactions in your body. There's a whole bunch of different carbohydrates. Every single one of those things has a different chemical reaction in your body. It's not just the calories. How many fats are there? There's fat, 9 calories per gram. That's the only thing that matters to fat. Like, really? It's not like building blocks and structures and precursors to other molecules. Like, really?
Yeah.
Things are all different. They all have different reactions in your body. They're all very complex and have very complex interactions with the rest of your body. Same with proteins, all
Yeah.
the different amino
Well,
acids, they do very different things.
the one thing I
So
never
it's
get is why
complex.
protein is 4 calories and part of an energy balance equation where it's not used for energy. So it's a
Yeah.
weird, like there's a lot of these weird disconnects in the calorie thing, and people go, well, it's just a good guesstimate, and I'm like, I don't want a good guesstimate. I want to be healthy, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. There's calories in, calories out. I was like, well, you have no idea your calories in or your calories out. You're never going to be able to calculate that perfectly, and you
Yeah.
don't need to. Like, how many
It is an
koalas are out there with a
equation that
calculator?
works okay for
Yeah.
people that are dieting and taking care, right? It works okay, but
Okay.
I just think there's way better ways to do it, you know?
I think so too. Yeah, and like you're talking about protein, right? I mean, yeah, we're using this as building blocks more than anything, and when you do actually use protein as a caloric source, it actually gets utilized differently in your body, and you actually get about 3.4 calories per gram when using it as a caloric source. And if you're eating naturally, if you're eating what you're designed to eat, you shouldn't have to count calories. You shouldn't have to count macros. You should just be able to eat intuitively. I've never seen a koala with a calculator trying to figure out their macros. Like, they just eat.
What
They eat what they're supposed to eat. And
What's your top
that's fine.
favorite foods? Like, if you had to give me like a top 5 things of what you eat, I know it's going to be steak is probably going to be up there. What
Mm.
other things do you eat? Do you incorporate seafood? Do you have like any other weird things that you eat that you like?
Yeah, it's mostly beef. So, a good, I'd think 97 to 99% of what I eat is beef, and most of that's steak. So like I just buy, like packs of like the either ribeye loins, or I'm getting New York now because like the ribeyes, they like doubled in price here in
Yeah.
Australia over the last years. I'm like, okay, well, forget that. So I've been getting New Yorks, and I just get these things. I wet age them, and then sort of do some dry aging as well, and I just cut these steaks up. So
So what do you
vast
get? You
majority
get
of what I
like the
have is
whole
steaks.
big thing and you chop it up yourself?
Yeah,
That's pretty
yeah.
gangster.
So yeah, it's great, and it's so cheaper. It's so much cheaper that way. You go to Costco and you get like a case. You can get like the whole big log of it, but if you get
Yeah.
a case of those things, it's even cheaper.
Wow.
So if you put those in the fridge, that's what, and you just leave them there in that cryovac pack. That's called wet aging, and you can leave it there for. I've left it as much as 6 weeks. That's probably pushing it. Most people do it about 4 weeks, and that just helps. It starts breaking down itself. It gets a lot more tender, and then after that, I'll cut it up in a big, thick, like 3-inch thick steaks, and I might salt them, and then just put them on drying racks where they're not touching, and so they can sort of dry out a bit, and they brown a lot better, and they concentrate the flavor more because it gets a bit dehydrated. And so I'll just grab 1 or 2 big old steaks out every night, and then just cook those up. So that's the vast majority of what I eat. I'll have some like pork bellies sometimes.
Yeah,
I'll
pork belly's
have
good.
some eggs as well. Less often. I'm still mostly just eating meat, but I don't have a problem with eggs. Some people have a problem with eggs, especially people with like autoimmune issues. They're more sensitive to eggs and dairy. And then I'll have very rarely will I have chicken. It's like if someone else makes the chicken, I'll eat the chicken.
Yeah,
but
if it's there.
I don't think I've bought chicken in a long
I
time.
don't like the way that they farm chicken, and I don't like what a lot of stuff they do with pork. You know, and I think
Right.
that that's a big problem for me. It's like if they were more consistently, like obviously I get pastured raised eggs and whatever, but you don't know how they're really raised, right? Like we don't see
Yeah.
these things happening. Um, and then with the pork, it's really hard to find like the good heritage breed, well
Mhm.
raised pork as well. With beef, it's just easy. It's all pretty good, even if it's grain fed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And, I think that's an important thing too. I don't get mad at people for eating whatever. I don't get like angry at vegans and things like that because, I think that a lot of these people are just like you and I. They're trying to do what's best for themselves. They're trying to do what's best for the world around them. I just think that we're looking at things a little differently, but I think our motivations are very similar. They don't want animals to suffer. I don't want animals to suffer either. I'm not going to support farming practices that are harming animals. I really like you know I like to buy directly from ranchers when I can, and I know like that cow's just been out in the field enjoying its life this whole time, and it's had a very quick, clean death. There's no nice way of killing anything, but with the pneumatic hammer and the electrocution sort of methods that we have, that's as close to instant as it is possible to get. And so I think that that's important to
Yeah, and I
do.
think that's another thing that you're right. Like, people need to understand that there is zero no kill diet, and the
Right.
diets. We can argue all day. Like, yeah, you kill a lot more bugs, plowing that field, and we know that it's right. But it sounds crazy to people, and people don't care about bugs because bugs don't have faces. It's like they care about these cows, but like to me, I think every time I see a cow, I'm almost like amazed every time I see one. Like if you get up close to cows, they're miraculous animals. They do things for us that no other animal on this planet can do besides maybe like a sheep, right? They eat grass and they upcycle it into more protein than we're even feeding it. There's nothing on the
Yeah.
planet that does that. There's nothing where you can get out more than you put in, except for with a cow. So it's weird that it's like the thing that people are complaining about is the only thing in nature that gives us more than it started with. It's like really the
Yeah.
only thing, right? Like, so it makes something out of nothing. There's really nothing else that's like that, And I
Yeah.
think that people need to look at cows in a different light.
And also, it's I read a lot of Thomas Sowell, who I think is just one of the most brilliant people around, and there's a book he has called Applied Economics: Thinking Past Stage One or Step One, and it's really a masterclass on how to think and how to approach these things. And when you start thinking past step one, it's like, okay, well, this is what it looks like on the surface. I make my decision. Okay, then what happens? Then what happens? Then what happens? You have to look several steps down the chain, like someone playing chess. You have to look 30 steps down to see like, ooh, actually that's a bad idea. um, Sometimes you don't have to go that far, but you should try to work it out to its logical extension. um, you're talking about like, well, we don't want to hurt animals. There was a study out of University of New South Wales in Sydney that in 2011 that actually showed that you have to kill 25 times amount of sentient animals, not just bugs, but uh,
Mice
mice,
and
snakes,
moles. Yeah.
birds, moles, all these things, and kangaroos and pigs and deer. They're to grow 1 pound of plant-based protein versus animal-based protein, because you're killing you to grow a crop. You have to necessarily kill and destroy an entire ecosystem. You have to kill all the plants and animals that live there, and every year you have to till up the soil and kill all the snakes, kill all the animals living there. You have to kill all the animals. You have to shoot all the kangaroos, all the deer, all the hog that are coming in trying to eat your crop. And so you're actually killing far more animals to grow that 1 pound of plant protein, and that's not even necessarily bioavailable plant protein. And you look at a cow, and like we said earlier, you have a full-grown cow or a buffalo. That's going to feed you for at least a year,
Yeah.
if not 2 years.
Feed the whole
Okay,
family for a year, basically, right?
yeah, exactly. That's one animal, right? One animal had to go down for you and your family to subsist for a year. How many animals are you killing by growing that quinoa? And the chickens as well. Like, I mean, you're gonna have like sort of like 360 chickens for that one cow, right? So if we're really trying to maximize life and minimize death, then you actually have to go animal based, and you have to go big ruminant animal based as well.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to go start protesting some of these vegans. You know, we have to throw paint on them and be like, "You're
Murderers.
killing the
Yeah.
sentient animals." Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the things that people do to protest these animal things are ridiculous. Like people gluing themselves to things and doing all these things to save the animals. But I think you're right. I think most of the people that eat in this carnivore way actually love animals and actually have a different relationship with them than a lot of people think. Like when I see a cow, I think, thank God, there's a great animal, doing its work for the planet. And I also think that if you listen to Sean Baker and some of these other people that have been talking about a lot of this regenerative agriculture and things like that, we are not close to being there yet. But if it's something that we could push, like I told you, I'm making a documentary about meat because I think it's really important. And if we could push things like that in a documentary to say like, hey, listen, if we got 30% of our farms instead of 3% of our farms to be regenerative, grass-finished farms, we can offset a lot of this other greenhouse emissions from other things. So not only with just the cattle industry itself, we can start offsetting the greenhouse emissions from in America. 10% of our greenhouse emissions are from the medical industry alone, from people dying from eating carbs. That's what it is. And we could greatly reduce these things by producing more cows in the proper way.
And also just waste. I mean, I'm appalled every day, when I'm in the hospital, the amount of waste and garbage we produce, because we have to have like all these sterile gowns or even unsterile gowns, all these sorts of things, all this equipment that just gets thrown in the trash. We have to put on all this PPE, go see one patient, and we throw it all in the trash. We have an entire team doing that every single time. One of these stupid gowns, it's not even sterile. It just goes over the top of you. You go in, talk to the patient for half a minute, and then you come back out, throw it out. It's $90.
Oh, geez.
$90. And you have a team of 6 people doing it with each patient. It's insane.
We're in the wrong business, man. We got to get in the PPE.
I do.
Yeah.
It really, seriously, it's just absolutely nuts. And there's a guy you may have come across, Peter Baylorstedt.
Oh yeah, I
think,
yep.
Oh, he's great, man. And like he's a PhD in forage agronomy, has a degree in animal nutrition, and which is actually quite robust science. Human nutrition is pretty weak because just epidemiological sort of studies. You can't really like study a human throughout the course of its life and
I'm glad that you said that too. That's very important for people to realize. A lot of this nutrition stuff we have is not great information.
Yeah, it is, and it's or it's not, and it's and so you have to look at other things, other avenues of scientific endeavor to sort of glean out the information. But you can do that with sheep, you can do that with chickens and cows. You can absolutely raise these things in similar environments and just change 1 or 2 things to see what happens. And so we actually have like very, very, very good science on nutrition from in animal nutrition. So he has a degree in that, and he shows very clearly that you cannot have plant agriculture without animal agriculture. This is where, where do we get our fertilizer? It's coming from manure of animals. And you have all this chaff and leftover a plant material that if you don't give it to a cow, if you don't sell it to a rancher, then you have to burn it, because you have to get rid of it somehow to make way for the next year's crop. And so it's actually quite harmful to the environment to grow crops. And it's the animals that eat these things, eat them down and recycle the nutrients. We talk about, oh my goodness, methane. No, wow, that's recycling these nutrients. They didn't create methane. That's them eating the plant material, recycling it, and getting those nutrients back out into the environment for plants to then use again in the next cycle of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people will be shocked to see the amount of garbage and carbon and crap that comes out of these factories producing their plant-based foods, right? Like we don't have that coming out of a farm. We might have the methane from the cattle, which actually resets it. Like it only stays in the air for 10 years, and then it basically like will refresh, right? So like, but the thing is, if we saw the pollution that were coming out of these plant-based, like already everybody argues for a plant-based diet, and already our diet in America is 70% plant-based, and we're the fattest first world country in the entire universe. So it's like, what has plant-based brought for us? Nothing yet. Nothing of health.
And it's taking over the rest of the world as well. The more plant-based we've gotten, the fatter and sicker that we've gotten as well. And after the 1977 USDA declaration that cholesterol caused heart disease, we're like, oh, okay, well, therefore meat's bad for you because it has saturated fat and cholesterol. So stop eating that. And people did, they listened to this. So in America, after 1980, we reduced our fat and cholesterol intake by 30%, reduced red meat by 33%, increased fruits and vegetables by 30 and 40% respectively, as well as grains and sugar. And what happened? The obesity rate tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates tripled. Type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even neurodevelopmental delays such as autism increased exponentially. They almost didn't exist before then. Now they're the only things we treat. And this is happening throughout every country that has adopted these dietary guidelines and measures. In Australia, they're very big on vegan, plant-based, all that sort of stuff. And they've actually, if you look at obesity, America is still top for obesity. But if you just look at overweight population, do I got that backwards? Anyway, I think Australia is the most overweight country now. It's just beat England. But I think America has more obese, or it might be vice versa. But I think that's the right way around.
You guys are catching up, though.
They're getting fatter.
Yeah.
And so people are getting fatter and sicker. And so this is going in the wrong direction. After World War II, in England and the US, the obesity rate was 6%. In 1980, when we adopted these things, in the UK, it was still 6%. In the US, it was 8%. All right. Now it's like 24%. Just obesity. Overweight is even more than that. And metabolically unhealthy is far more than that. Yeah. I think it's something like 93% of Americans have some signs of metabolic ill health. Meaning that only 7% of Americans are metabolically healthy. That's shocking.
Do you think a carnivore diet, or somewhere along the lines of a carnivore diet, is what everybody should be doing?
I think so. I think if you're looking at optimal health and optimizing your health, then I think that's no question in my mind that comes from eating optimally. And for our species, that's going to be carnivore. Some people say, well, people are different. Some people are better. Maybe carnivore is better. Maybe they're, because of their blood type, they should be a vegan or something insane like that. But we are one species, right? And as one species, we have a common evolutionary past. We have common biology, and we have a common optimal diet. Maybe some people, like Europeans, have more defenses against suboptimal food, like grains and so forth, than the native Australians, the Native Americans, but that doesn't mean that it's optimal for either. I get this from people, even doctors, say, well, but people are different. Optimal can be different for different people. And I always ask them, can you name one species of animal where two members of the same species have different optimal diets? Can you name one? None of them have been able to do that. And so I think that, if you think about it, if we are the same biologically, we will have the same optimal diet. And so I think that
the difference is probably choice, right? Like, we have the choice. So there's no animal on the planet other than the animals that we feed that have any dictation over what they eat. They eat what they eat because they're animals, right? Like, and we eat because we want ice cream, because we saw a commercial, because we get the free toy in the Happy Meal. Like, the reason why we want things are completely different and completely irrational, right? Like, we don't want a Happy Meal because it's got protein. We want a Happy Meal to get the toy inside, and we want the sugar cereal to get the toy inside, or to be one of the cool kids that gets to eat that, whatever it is. But like, I think with animals, I tell people this all the time. I said, like, I don't even really care what you eat. But if you took like 10 foods and 5 of them were like decently high in protein, and you just stuck to those foods, you'd probably lose weight, just on the fact that you're like, animals have just these limited palettes of things that they eat, right? Like, they don't eat the same. I mean, they eat the same things like over and over and over. We as humans have hundreds and millions of choices of things to eat every single day,
Yeah, which is very abnormal. right? Yeah, I mean the diet in the wild is very monotonous. And people say, "Oh, well, don't you get tired of just eating meat?" And I was like, "Do lions get sick of eating gazelle? Does
I
cow get
have a
sick of eating
great,
grass?"
I have what I think is a great solution to that. I call it the
Hmm.
steak fast, and I tell people this. It's real easy. It's basically a carnivore diet, just the way you or I would do it. But basically, I tell people, just think of it this way: like you're overweight and you need to do some fasting. Well, you're going to fast for like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. But every time you're hungry, you actually get to eat a steak, which is like one of the best foods ever. So think of it as like you're fasting and then you get a steak, and then you're fasting and then you get a steak. And hopefully,
Nice.
by the time the person does that for 30 days or 60 days, they're locked in.
Mhm.
We try to do things around here where we lock people in before we tell them what they're doing, and then they go, "Oh wow, I feel really great," and then you're like, "We're already locked in."
Yeah, yeah. By the way, you were doing a carnivore diet. That's what that is.
Basically,
Yeah,
right? Rather than it being daunting for people, we try to make it so that so that it's easy.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. As a meat fast. I guess yeah, you just fast, and then but if you really need something, you can eat a steak.
I think
You
that
know,
keeps away a lot
yeah,
of the other stuff. Like people always want to know what they can get away with.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's why I talk about like the no plants, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners or artificial ingredients because it's yeah, you're right. They're just like in the keto community, it started out as being very healthy, whole food sort of approach, and a lot of meat and fat, and that's great. And now there's a lot of like keto snacks and a lot of artificial sweeteners and monk fruit sugar and
Yeah,
all these sorts of things, and it's sort of going sideways again. And I talk to people, they lose a lot of weight, feel real healthy on a keto diet, and then they start doing that sort of all the artificial keto stuff, and they put the weight back on and they
yeah.
start getting sick again.
And
you
unfortunately,
know
I'm friends with all the people that make that stuff a lot. So
yeah.
I have to tell them like, hey man, like yeah, I do keto, but I'm not eating your stuff because it throws
Yeah.
me off the deep end, even though some of it's really good.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, I do like that there are commercial moves being made in that, because once you start having that, once you start getting the interest of uh people in business and in the food industry, well then you've made the mainstream, and you'll start having all these different products that people can eat. But I think that it can also cause a problem when you're having a bunch of artificial sweeteners and things like that,
Yeah.
and so it can go the wrong way as well. So you still have to sort of think about these things as a
How do
whole
you
food
feel about
approach.
people doing a carnivore diet, doing little things like eating fast food without the bun, things like that? Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, if it's it depends on what they put in it, but
Well, if you're just eating like
I
beef patties from In and Out or McDonald's or something.
yeah, I do that. If I'm they may put some spices in it. God knows if they fry it in seed oils or something like that. But I actually spoke to McDonald's people at McDonald's and asked them, I was like, "You guys cook this in oil or anything like that?" And they're like, "No, they put it in like a panini press and they just
Yeah. Yep.
press it on both sides, and then the Whopper like flame grilled and all that sort of stuff." So they're not using oils, which is great. And so if I'm traveling and I just don't have the ability to like cook a steak or something like that, I'll go to a fast food place and I'll just get a stack of the patties, and that works great.
I'm glad to
And
see you're human.
yeah. Yeah, but it's actually quite a good option,
Yeah.
especially when you're traveling. And like when I'm going through Southeast Asia, the you go to restaurants, they're putting sauces on everything, they're mixing everything with a whole bunch of different spices and seasonings that I don't really want. And so for me, a really good option was just to go to a McDonald's or a Burger King and just get the pat. I mean, they were shocked. They were appalled. It took so long to like explain what I wanted with the language barrier when I was in
Yeah.
Vietnam. And like I was just like amazed. He was just like, "Oh my God, this is the first time I've ever seen this in my life." And they went and did it, and they made me like 10 Whopper patties, just the beef patties. And like they came out and they were like all reverent, and they're like,
Yeah, they want to
"Here it
watch you
is."
eat it. Like they're like, "What
They
is this
did.
guy doing?" Yeah.
They all came out from the back, from the kitchen. They were all just like, "Who is this guy who's going to be eating all this stuff?" And they just sat there and like just watched me eat this. So like fascinated by the fact that I was just
Yeah.
eating just
I always use this as an opportunity to talk to people about the carnivore diet. So a lot of times I'll go to like In and Out or Five Guys or whatever, and the person behind the counter or somebody in the place go, "I should have got it like that." I'm like, "Yeah, you should." You know why? Because it doesn't
yeah.
have blah 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 in it, and like I'll use it as a chance to not overdo it, but I'll give them a little,
Yeah.
30-second
Taster.
school on the carnivore diet and why it'd be a good idea for them.
Yeah, it is, and it comes up. It comes up a lot, especially when I moved to Australia. They were big into the vegan side of things, and so I would have these conversations all the time because I'm just eating there. I have like a stack of meat or a bunch of eggs or something like that, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's a lot of protein." I was like, "Well, it's more to do with the fat, but and then they'd ask me like, "Well, why aren't you having a salad? Why aren't you doing this?" And it just naturally would come up. And then because it is so different, especially then, no one had heard of it down here. They just wanted to know more, and maybe they were challenging it, questioning it, and be like, "Well, how about this? Well, how are you getting your fiber? Well, how are you getting your nutrients? Well, what about this? Isn't that going to cause colon cancer?" And so we have these discussions, and so I'd have that discussion sometimes 2 or 3 times a day
It's funny
because
they
it
they
just
automatically turn into a doctor when they're like, what about this? What about that? Right? It's
yeah,
like, oh, all of a
yeah,
sudden you care now, right?
yeah,
When they
exactly,
probably
and
didn't
it's
care before, they weren't even thinking about it. You
that's
know?
it too. They're just eating, high octane crap. And then as soon as you're doing something like that's different from the norm, they're just like, how could you be doing that? And
Yeah,
it's just like, look at you and look at me,
yeah. Is that
you know?
healthy? Yeah,
And sometimes you want to say that, you don't want to be rude, but at the same time, it's just like, listen, I like, but that actually did help a lot of things because I was in, pretty good shape, especially then, I came over, I was still playing rugby. I still had time to play rugby and actually go to the gym. So I was actually, very, very good shape. And so people looked at me, oh, that's so unhealthy. And I just sort of look at them and they're like, okay, well, obviously you're not, you're in really good shape, but
yeah.
isn't that to do with blah, blah,
You
blah.
you seem to be in
And
excellent shape still. You still doing it? You still lifting and everything?
very rarely, man. It's been like 4 months since I've been able to get in the gym. But like, I mean, that's also the beauty of this diet is that I just, you build muscle so much easier. You build just lean muscle. You're not bulking up and putting a bunch of intramuscular fat or glycogen and water weight. So you don't have to then cut it out later. It's just the muscle you put on is lean muscle mass and it sticks around. And so, I'm probably 225 at the moment. When
That's
I'm
great.
lifting consistently, I go up to like 240,
You just get
and
jacked.
yeah, and just get jacked, and I like being that weight, but when I'm not able to consistently work out, I'll still stay lean, I'll still stay muscular, but I won't have the bulk that I normally have. And yeah, unfortunately, I've just been absolutely just burning a candle at both
Yeah,
ends and in the
you
middle.
said one last thing before we let you go here. You talked about your day job.
Mhm.
What actually do you do during the day, and how does that differ from what the plant-free MD does at night?
Yeah. So I'm neurosurgical resident. So I'm training in neurosurgery. So I've been doing that for a number of years now. And so that's sort of all consuming. And so I'll have very early starts, very late finishes, and then doing on calls overnights and weekends as well. So I've worked as much as 135 hours in a week, and that just rolled into the next week because you run out of hours, and now you're
Yeah.
just Monday again.
Wow.
Um, so it's a bit crazy sometimes. And the whole podcast stuff I've sort of been doing on the side of that. So in like the couple hours I have maybe at night, I'll just try and do things, try and do interviews like this, and try to get content out there just to try to get people the information that I think is worthwhile, and so that they can make their own decisions. And then the podcast stuff, I try to do interviews. I try to talk to people that are I think would benefit for people to hear from. And then we do carnivore groups, like a 30-day challenge carnivore group.
I just saw
um,
you just started one, right? November 1st.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we do it every month, and so on the first of every month, it's just called How to Carnivore. That's the website, it's howtocarnivore.com. And it's like a 30-day sort of challenge of trying to do like really strict pure carnivore, where you're cutting out everything else, all plants, everything, even coffee, which is a hard one for people. And just give it a try. Just try it for 30 days and see how you feel. And we get the support. We're in a Telegram group, so you're messaging with myself and my partner Simon, and then other people in the group. And we do weekly Zoom meetings, as well as we send off modules and more information
That's
to help
great.
people with that.
That's
So
really
it's
cool, man. I think a lot of people benefit from, you don't necessarily need a whole lot of coaching in carnivore. It's like eat meat and
yeah.
water. Some people do need coaching. Some people need to, but I think more of what it is, it's like inspiration, right? Like you
Mm.
need somebody saying every day, hey, we're doing it today. Let's go, I think
Yeah.
that what you're doing is great.
No, well, thank you, man. Yeah, it's like the same thing with like going to the gym. Like the hardest part about going to the gym is going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
You know, just get off your ass and go. And that's something I've been I've been guilty about recently because like I love lifting and I love working out. And I love being in good shape, and it just kills me that I haven't been able to sort of keep up with it. I go in spurts, and so you know, but like you say, like if I had a gym partner where I was just like I'm you know, responsible to this person because they're expecting me to be there, you know, at 6:15. So if I don't show up, you know, I'm the dick. And you know, and it gets you going. And so yeah, so having a group like that, like the carnivore group, can help people stay motivated as well because they're seeing, you know, the daily sort of messages from all the people on Telegram, you know, how they're doing, what they're eating, how it's going for them, how, you know, great they feel and all that sort of stuff. And so it can help people stay on it. And we just, you know, so far we're getting pretty positive feedback, which is
Yeah,
great.
I predict that you're going to be famous before you finish your residency, and then you're going to be like, now what do I do? Now,
Yeah.
right? You get everybody on the carnivore diet and get them all healthy. It's like, you know, then you finish your residency, right?
Well, you know, it goes hand in hand, like all this stuff, because like in medicine, like we're supposed to be about getting people healthy, keeping them healthy. And right now we're just, you know, just basically damage control. You know, someone comes to me, they have a brain tumor. I'm like, okay, well, we need to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
Well, okay, things have gone wrong for years before you ever came to see me with that brain tumor. And so what can we do to stop that brain tumor from ever happening in the first place?
Yeah.
And there's a ton of data on this, you know, that, I mean, like I said before, when we changed our dietary regimen, the cancer rates have tripled. That's insane.
Yeah.
You know. And so, you know, we see a lot of this. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of studies, peer-reviewed studies, even randomized controlled trials to do with cancer and a ketogenic diet, just a
Yeah.
ketogenic, not even full
I
carnivore.
was pretty deep into that. I don't know if you know who Ron Penna is, but Ron Penna is a good
Yeah.
friend of ours. He started Quest Nutrition and then later sold it. But when he owned Quest, he was on a quest to cure cancer. And he had all these scientists, Dom D'Agostino, and all these scientists doing like studies on the keto diet and cancer. And they had just such tremendous, I don't want to say like they cured cancer by any means, but they had helped so many people, especially with brain tumors, get into remission with a ketogenic diet, really, really high fat ketogenic diet. And they were doing all sorts of studies and work that they're still carrying on over there. But I mean, it's amazing what can be done with diet. And I think a lot of people don't even think about it being something that could be part of the cure.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's really interesting you say that because I've actually pitched that idea to my neurosurgical department and did a whole presentation at our grand rounds about the metabolic theory of cancer and how this actually stems from
Yeah, I'm sure you're
mitochondria.
familiar with Thomas Seyfried, I believe his name is, right?
Absolutely.
He's
Love
like
that guy. Yeah.
cancer is a metabolic disease and wrote all those
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've had him on my podcast and I've followed his work for years.
Yeah, that guy's
And then
great.
eventually, yeah, he's great. And I presented all that information, his and others work on this, showing that, hey, look, we're already using this and it's already working. Smaller trials, but it's showing very promising results. And so I just sort of made that pitch to the department, and it actually went over pretty well. And so they're like, yeah, you should do a study. So
Yeah.
I'm actually
It,
working with Prof. Seyfried and some of his colleagues to get a study going here with our GBM patients. We
That's
get like
awesome.
two to five of these things a week, and those are just death sentences.
yeah.
You know, and so, you know, we are hopefully going to be able to make a study with actually like big numbers.
I'll send you an interview I did with this guy. I'll send it to you offline. But I did an interview with a guy who basically had a brain tumor all tangled in his brain. And he weighed 330 pounds when he was in the hospital with this tumor. He was about to get married. He told his wife, hey, we're not getting married. I have a brain tumor. I'm going to die. And she's like, well, just listen to the doctors and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, she's trying to, and then she ends up telling him about a ketogenic diet that she had heard from some friend. And it was like just random. He goes on this keto diet. And then they realize, oh, he needs a higher fat keto diet through, I think, the Charlie Foundation or whatever that is. And he went on this high fat ketogenic diet. And next thing you know, they're telling him he doesn't have brain cancer anymore. You know, and they did have to do surgery to remove parts of it from his brain that were like intertwined into things. But basically, like, he's 100% now, doesn't have any more tumors. This is like 10 years ago. He went from 330 pounds down to 180 pounds. it's just a miracle to see that, like, hey man, even if it worked for one person, like
Yeah.
that's pretty much of a miracle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in medicine, we do case reports. You have something that's like, well, that's shocking. You don't really see that. And so you do a case report and say, hey, look at this. This is interesting. We don't know why it happened. It may be this, it may be that, but this happened, something to think about. And that's something that you then model larger studies off of. And there are quite a number of those examples. There's a kid, he's a grown ass man now, but he's a guy who lives in the UK, Andrew Scarborough.
Andrew Scarborough. I was just gonna say his name.
Yeah.
I was like, is it Andrew Scarborough? Yeah, I know him.
Yeah.
He's
was
awesome.
that the guy you were talking about?
He's friends with him. I met them at the same conference actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I spoke with him recently. I haven't published that talk yet, but so he had the glioblastoma is like the most aggressive form of cancer, and it's in your brain, and it just goes gangbusters. The average life expectancy from diagnosis without treatment is 3 months, right? Very aggressive. And with treatment, 15 to 18 months. Okay. So better, but not that great. And there are different kinds of GBM that can be more or less aggressive. So Andrew had the most aggressive form of GBM, right? And he sort of got that diagnosis. He had some of it debulked, some of it removed, some of it couldn't because it was in his motor strip. It would have left him paralyzed down one side. And so they left that alone. So he still had tumor in his brain. And he got these moleculars back and just said, this is the worst case scenario. This really doesn't respond to chemo and radiation. So he just said, I'm not going to get chemo and radiation then. I'm not going to waste my time. And so he looked down the different pathways, started going keto. Then he went carnivore. He's been basically carnivore for the last 10 years. There's no sign of disease on his MRI.
And
he's off all his medications.
What's crazy is when you were mentioning how, how long you live on that, I was just thinking when you were saying it, I'm like, I think I met Andrew like 10 years ago. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's how crazy it is. Like, I'm like, he's still around and he's still doing well. And I think I met him like when he first started this journey,
Yeah. Yeah. And he's doing great. And now, he's doing really, really well. And he's actually doing high level research. He's starting a trial in England looking at a ketogenic diet to help other GBM patients.
Yeah. That's
amazing. So he's actually putting this into practice. So it's really great to see that. And there's other institutions. I was just at a conference, the one I sort of argued that, vegetables are bad for you. There was a guy who went up there and started presenting, same things that, Professor Seafried, a lot of Seafried's work. And he was starting a GBM trial in New Zealand. And so I was like, I got to talk to this guy. And so I was like, hey, I'm trying to make this pitch to my department too. So now we're talking and sharing ideas, and, could possibly even turn this into a multi-institutional study, which carries a lot more weight in the academic community. When you say you have multi-center sort of approach to this, and like, wow, okay, that's a better study because you're looking at the very different populations.
You're in Australia, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And what brought you down there?
I just thought it would be sort of interesting. Obviously the rugby connection. I was interested in Australia just because I played rugby, and Australia's a big rugby nation, and I just wanted to check it out. Australia always sounded cool. And a lot of good weather and beaches and rugby. I was like, that's a great idea. And I had to leave my original residency program for a family emergency. My folks were unfortunately unwell. They both needed surgery at the same time, and my dad had further medical issues that I just thought, like, well, I need to be home and take care of my folks for a while. And so I left my program and took some time off to help with them. And then because I was taking time off, I was available when there was a humanitarian crisis in Bangladesh. Like there's a genocide in Burma. Like, no one talks about these things, but there are actually horrible things happening in the world besides, pronoun mischaracterization.
Yeah, that's all we hear about.
Yeah. And like, and then there's like an actual genocide where they slaughtered 200,000 people in a month in Burma, and on purely racial, ethnic, religious grounds. And in like Holocaust level evil ways. I mean, things that just don't bear repeating. And about 1 million people fled into Bangladesh, and they had this massive crisis. They had all these people that needed help. and didn't have any help. And like ISIS was very active at the time. It was very dangerous over there. And so, they were, bombing and killing people, and especially, foreigners. They blew up a hotel just because there was one American staying there, killed everyone, all the locals and foreigners as well. And so no one was really going. And so I felt that I sort of needed to go because no one was going. It wasn't like one of these things like, Haiti or Nepal, where just everyone and their mother was flying over there to try to help, and actually was taking up necessary resources for people there on the ground. But like, this was very different. Like, no one was going. So I felt I needed to go. And so I was there for a while, helping out in the volunteering in the refugee camps. And then I was just sort of looking at like, okay, well, it's about that time. It's been a few years now. I need to get back into hospital medicine and finish up this neurosurgery thing. And I was just looking at where I wanted to go. Do I go back to my old program? Do I go somewhere else? And then I had a lot of friends who were doctors that I played rugby with that were in Australia, and they were like, "It's amazing here. You should definitely come down, and you'd really love it." So I was like, "Well, just check it out. I'm a bit of a free agent, might as well."
Yeah. And you love it down there?
It's really good. I really like it. It's where I'm at in Perth, it's on the West Coast. So it's a bit more separate from everywhere else, but it's really, really nice. It's a very good lifestyle. It's sort of the climate, sort of like, Southern California, like Mediterranean sort of climate. And that's cool, man. There's this, you drive out in the country, and instead of like, deer all around, there's just kangaroos, like,
you have a carnivore girlfriend down there too, don't you?
I do. Yeah.
I saw on Instagram.
Yeah.
And she eats the same way as you?
Yeah, she does. Yeah. And it's funny because I converted her over. She thought I was really weird at first, and now she's doing it as well. And now she's like, wow, I feel so much better.
Yeah.
Fixed with like psoriasis and all these sorts of things. And now she gets all pissed off because she'll be like, I'll be talking to someone, and they'll be like, they're like, "Oh yeah, I do carnivore, but have some fruit and this, that, and the other." And now she's like more of a purist than me. She's like, well, "That's bullshit.
That's not carnivore."
Yeah. Like, what the hell? I was like, well, easy. It's like they get to eat what they want.
Well, I'm not going to admit anything to her then.
Yeah.
I'll have to lie to her a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she's great. And so it's been really nice. It's I miss America. I absolutely love America. I've since I was a kid, I've been very patriotic, and I love what America is and stand for, and where we've come from. And obviously, there's no perfect system, and there's always flaws that you can find. But I think overall, America has done really good things for a lot of people, and I really like that. And so I do miss it. I think eventually I do want to make it home.
If you come back, you got to come train with us someday. I think you're a hero. I think we need more people like you. When you just told me why you ended up in Australia, I think that illustrates a lot about you going to help people in need. You're helping a lot of people in need with this diet and what you're doing. So I just wanted to say thank you. And also, I know it's very early in the morning over there, so thank you for taking the time to get on here with us. I definitely would like to introduce you to my brother Mark and get you on his podcast as well, because I think that you just carry a great message. So thanks, Doc.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure.
I know. We'll talk soon, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Sounds good, man.
Cool. Take care.
You too.